Hello, we're back in our new studio. We are serving up another edition of what has become Cooking with Trevor in the Kitchen, or In the Kitchen with Trevor. It is our nutrition segment of our professional performance wellness team. For our monthly training objectives, we have been doing a health and wellness for nutrition and giving the guys alternatives to just their regular meat and potatoes. And for those of them that might not be comfortable enough in the kitchen to try something outside of the box other than a frozen hamburger patty or something simple like that. So I just wanted to show them how much you can do with some simple ingredients and be a little more healthy. It has evolved into a PSA event, and we're talking about a little kitchen safety. So since it is, what do they call, sweater weather? That's hard to say. What I like to call soup season, as now is we are in our fall months, and we are gonna be cooking a soup. It's Grandma's classic vegetable soup. This is a minestrone, Italian descent. There's really no way to mess this up. It's just a vegetable soup. There are beef versions. Classic country version would be beef broth. This one uses chicken broth. We also have onion. We have some cabbage. I've got a little bit of sweet potato, carrots, and celery. Our classic ingredients, we're going to add some diced tomatoes. Over here draining, I have a little bit of spinach and some white beans. I've got cannelli and navy beans we're going to add in there. And so all we're doing right now is we're going to start off with a little bit of oil and some butter. And once that starts to melt, maybe I'll turn the heat up just a hair, and we'll get that going. And then we're going to start softening up our vegetables. So while we're waiting on that, one of the things that happens in the fall season as we get towards Thanksgiving, people like to fry turkeys and things like that. And we often, as the fire department, get called for these dangerous events when the turkey gets away from you, when they're dropping frozen turkeys into a fryer. The grease or the oil, the heated oil, reacts to the water droplets that are on your frozen turkey, and that the water and the oil do not mix. So you want to be really careful in doing that. Also, another reminder is if you have a grease fire on the stove, do not throw water on it. That is going to have a very violent reaction and make your situation that much worse. So please be cognizant of that when you are cooking for your family and you're cooking your turkeys and you might end up with a grease fire in the oven. The best thing to do is to turn the oven off and leave the door closed. You don't want to open the door if you have a fire in the oven, because adding oxygen to that environment will make the fire grow. So if you leave the door closed, the fire will go out, and then you will have no damage done to the kitchen. So that's a good reminder right there for some of your holiday cooking safety tips. Now, what we've done right now so far is for our soup, we have added the onions. We're going to put that in there just for a couple of minutes to soften it up. And to keep yourself on track, we are going to go ahead and set our timer. So this is another very good habit to get into when you're in the kitchen, is to set your timer so that way if you get sidetracked or you get a phone call or somebody comes to the door, the dog ran off and chased a squirrel across the street or something like that, some emergency you have to go handle, you'll know that you remember that you have something on the heat and you don't want to forget that that's there. So right now we're adding, let's see, we're going to add our onion. We'll put a little salt in there. Next up, we've got our carrots and celery. And I like to use organic ingredients. If you have a garden at home, would be ideal. That some of these vegetables are pretty easy to grow, and you can have these on hand. If you don't have a garden at home that is producing vegetables, maybe you have a small herb garden. Well, as you can see, just from prepping myself, the vegetables that I got from the produce market at the grocery store, I have a lot of shavings and cut tips and ends and leaves that I wasn't going to use. Well, these are excellent to make mulch with, and you can compost all of that stuff. So you're not throwing it away. So every dime that you spend in the grocery store, you can then use to start yourself a compost heap, and then you can feed your plants and your herb garden and your flowers and your azaleas and whatever else you have around the house. And it becomes a very natural, very effective fertilizer for all of that. So right now our oil and our butter is just softening up the onions. I didn't chop them too small because I do have some guys on the crew that do not like onions, so I left them big enough so that they can work around them in the soup. So next we've got our carrots and celery. We'll put that in just a moment. So you really can't go wrong. If you like green beans, you can add green beans. You can do zucchini. You can do regular potato versus sweet potato. I went with the sweet potato just for color. And there goes our alarm. So now we're going to add our celery and carrots. And in just a moment, when we get a few more items in there, we're going to reposition our camera and let you come and see the developments as we're softening these vegetables. So we were talking about what you can add. It's really up to your taste. If you don't like cabbage, you can use just spinach. The last time I made this, I used chard, which is another dark leafy green that really adds an interesting texture to a soup. So like a chicken noodle, we are going to be adding the ditalini pasta, which are small, very round, circular pasta bits that go in the soup. So it does have a pasta in it. You can do it without the pasta. I have seen people add a meat to the soup. So there really are no rules to a good vegetable soup. It's just whatever you prefer. So we're gonna let this cook for just a minute or two. Next, we're gonna add, I believe the potatoes will go in next. So as you add ingredients, you're usually adding the harder ingredients, the more dense vegetables, and then end up with your leafy greens towards the end, and pasta would be just before it's finished cooking. So a couple more minutes. We've got sweet potato. I've chopped up some garlic. We're also going to add a Parmesan rind. Apparently, some people do this frequently with spaghetti sauce. Adds a lot of flavor. We'll take it out after it has cooked for a while. And as it develops, it's just going to continue to cook in with the soup and add a lot of flavor. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reset my timer. We'll start it over. We'll add the sweet potatoes now. And we're going to put the garlic in. And while we're doing that, we'll take a short break. We'll reset the camera. We'll bring it over here so you can actually see what's going on in the pot as we're cooking this down. Okay, great. Be right back. Okay, so what we've got going on here is we're still softening our vegetables. As you can see, we got a lot of color going on here. We've got our onion, our celery, we got some beautiful carrot and sweet potato, which is mixing together quite nicely, give us that fall color that it adds a lot, not just the flavor, but the overall presentation of your soup. I like to have a little bit of color in there as well. So our timer's going off again. We're gonna restart that. And at this point, we get to add our tomatoes. So I got the diced tomatoes. We are going to add our Parmesan cube, which is just about a 2-inch by 3-inch chunk of the rind that goes in there. And again, we're going to fish that back out later. And then we're adding our chicken broth, which I've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 48 ounces of that. So I like to use the organic. You can use low sodium if you want. I use the regular because I don't like to add too much sodium on top of that. So I just let whatever natural sodium is in the organic chicken broth be pretty much the sodium that I put in the soup, and then you can always add more later to flavor in your personal bowl rather than in the whole batch. So we've got that in there. What we're gonna do is we'll give this a stir, and as these things will soak up a lot of that broth, we're gonna throw our beans in there. You see I've got two different kinds of beans. They are both white beans, but they are two different types, the cannellini and the navy beans, and those will go in there. Just slightly different flavor profile, a little bit different texture, but as you can see, we've got nice red, green, white, very Christmassy, a little orange for the fall. So all the colors you see in the leaves this time of year, that's why I call it soup season. I really enjoy that. So we're gonna crank up the heat. We're gonna boil this down for about 30 minutes, and then we'll check back in with you before we end up putting in our leafy greens. All right, so we've kind of boiled it a little aggressively. I wanted to make sure the potatoes got good and done, but as you can see, we've got everything softened up, and my cameraman has already attested to the fact that it smells amazing. So we've got our colors there. All the flavors are mixing together very well. At this point, we've got about 10 minutes left. So we're gonna add our leafy greens. So that is gonna soften up our cabbage and our spinach. Like I said, you can use chard, you can use any other leafy green you might like, but that is one of the unique features to this soup, is that it does have leafy green in it. So we're gonna put the cabbage in there. We're also going to add, now I have added an enormous amount of vegetables in this mix. So we went ahead and used a little more broth. I might add a little more water to this because I do want it to be more of a soup and less of a stew. So, and that is fine. Like I said, there's really no rules. This is one of those, a vegetable soup is a guideline and not a hard rule. There's so many different types and variations of this recipe. I'm gonna put about half a box of a ditalini in here, which, like I said, is really tiny little pasta bits, and you just want enough to kind of get a little flavor, that texture mixed in with all of your vegetables, to add that unique minestrone textures to this. Of course, those leafy greens are going to wilt down and they're going to shrink a good bit, but we do have a lot of vegetable in there. That's going to be a really, really hearty soup for your fall season. We're going to simmer this for about 10 minutes. I'm going to add a little water. We'll let it sit for 10 minutes. We'll come back. We'll see what the finished product looks like. You're going to want to serve this with a nice crusty, I got a big crusty French bread over here, and we'll heat that up and sprinkle a little Parmesan on the top, and we are good to go. So we'll see you back in about 10 minutes. Okay, so time is up. The pasta will be ready. The greens have softened a bit. Our colors are all melded quite nicely. I did add just a little more. I added a little bit of water because I do have an enormous amount of vegetable in here. And I wanted to make sure that it stayed as a soup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ladle out just a little serving here. It can cook much longer. The only thing is if you do it in a slow cooker and do it for a long period of time, you will end up overcooking the pasta and the greens, and they'll be a little bit mushy. So if you like them more crisp, you want to time it out about like we have, about probably total cooking time 45 minutes, somewhere in there, and you should have a pretty flavorful stew. So what we're gonna, or a soup. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna just pull some of this out. Get a little bowl of that going. Please remember to use your hot plates when you're handling your cookware. They do tend to get hot, and we don't want you to end up with a burn. So we'll bring this over here. I don't know if the cameraman wants to go mobile, or I can bring it to you. So to finish off this soup, traditionally is we add a little fresh grated parm. I prefer the fresh to the store-bought pre-made stuff because, as I've mentioned before, all your pre-shredded cheeses have an anti-caking agent that they put on it, and that's going to end up in your body and in your recipe. So this is what we have here. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a very hearty, full vegetable soup. A little bit of pasta in there, all your leafy greens. We do have another section of our French bread already in the oven. I'm gonna save this for the guys that are probably gonna eat a little bit later on. We got this done a little early. I'm gonna take a little taste test here. So as you can see, it's a very hearty soup. You won't miss the meat. You've got your protein in there. It's very hot, but very, very good flavors. You got all your fall flavors. You've got your sweet potato, your crunchy greens. That's a good fall soup. So give this recipe a try. I will make sure that we get the actual recipe linked up, but you can always look at any recipe site. Allrecipes.com is a good one, or just look up minestrone soup. Hearty fall vegetable soup. Remember, stay safe, be healthy. We'll see you next time.